What is going on, guys? Welcome back. Commentary for you, Ryan Moody, Jimmy Smith, our MMA show, and we literally, for once, didn't really know what to talk about. So we kind of need your guys' help. You know, there's no UFC this weekend, so if you want to hear about, I don't know, pick your story in the bottom, and then whoever gets the most thumbs up, we'll maybe cover them in that order. So, do you care about the fake Bucky Barber on Twitter? Do you care about, which the MMA media ran with, thank God we didn't jump on that bandwagon, Jimmy? Do you want to hear about, Jorge and Kamaru today, or whenever you're hearing this over the course of the week? What is it that you want us to hear about? And I'm sure someone will say, we just want to hear Ryan not talk. But we have landed on Daniel Cormier and Stipe. DC has came out and said he may consider retirement if he doesn't get the trilogy here. And it's interesting because, in all fairness, when we started this, for some reason, I was just thinking Jon Jones on the mind. And it's ironic when I think about DC, I don't think about these Stipe. Yeah, I know they're 1-1. I know that's when the rubber match has to happen in terms of MMA folklore. But it's odd to me that I tie so much more of Cormier to Jon Jones than I really do anyone else.
They'll live forever as kind of, they would probably have to fight 3 times, but let me put it this way. If they fought 3 times, it would be our Ali Frazier. If they fought 3 times, which they have not. They've only fought twice. Remember, the second one was a no contest because of the blood test, But as rivals, Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier will always live forever. Always. Stipe DC, 2 great fights with 2 great knockouts, but you didn't get the feeling there was a personal contrast between DC and Stipe. There still isn't one. They have a lot of respect for one another. Jon Jones and DC are just foils for one another. They don't like each other. They fight very, very differently. They're 2 of the greatest fighters of their era, and DC couldn't get a win over Jon Jones. So that's why they're tied together. That's why that's always what you think of. It's because the contrasts run deeper than just fighting.
Let me ask you this, because it's probably going to be the first thing most people think of. More winnable fight for DC, Jon Jones or Stipe?
Stipe.
I'm the same way. Do you
no
feel
hesitation, Stipe? Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't even sigh. You didn't even think. It was just automatically. Do you think in some strange way this dictates DC's position that maybe he doesn't want to see Jon Jones again? Because like you said, as far as the build-up, listen, I firmly think Stipe is one of the best of all time. From a competitor to competitor standpoint, this is the fight that, we probably should see. But when you talk about just trying to overcome that one person you just couldn't get past, that person you always played second fiddle to, the person that's just a little bit better than you were, the trash talk, the rivalry, which has mellowed a little bit in the years as Jon has aged and saw the error in some of his ways. And obviously DC has had to watch Jon Jones continue his domination. Don't you want to see that just a little bit more? Because, that's kind of where I am. Like, I want to see DC try to conquer the mountain he couldn't get over, if that makes any sense. That would mean more to me to see him beat Jon Jones than it would to see beat Stipe again, even if I thought the first one was a little bit, I guess, difficult to think would always happen. Like when he beat him, I was like, well, I don't know how much, I don't know how much stock I put into that. And then obviously Stipe levels it up and you're like, yeah, that's the way I thought it would go. But with Jon Jones, it's pretty much always been an uphill climb.
It's always been an uphill climb. Weight cuts get harder as you get older. I don't think DC wants to go through any weight cuts. It would change things if Jon Jones decided he wanted to go up to heavyweight, but he doesn't. And also, it's getting toward the end of his career. He has said, if I don't get a trilogy with Stipe, I'm not going to fight again. I'm retiring. Does he really want to go out with Jon Jones, his nemesis, getting another win? No. Now, I don't think he's afraid of that. I have no indication that he's that kind of guy. He's always been up for a challenge. But Stipe is the rubber match. He knows he can win. It makes him a double champ. He would retire a double champ. And that means a lot. Now, no, I know he's not currently the 205-pound champion, but to go out as heavyweight champ, having held the heavyweight and light heavyweight belts, that means a lot. And Jon Jones just has always had his number. So it's just with the fights he has available, with the time he has left, I think Stipe makes the most sense. He really does. It's a winnable fight that does a lot for his legacy. He can ride off into the sunset as the heavyweight champion. That says something.
It really is the ultimate play of, I'm going out on my own terms.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things we've discussed a lot in the course of the show is fighters that leave and then come back. How can we miss you if you don't go away? Uriah Faber comes to mind. Do you think that Cormier, as competitive as he is, and he's an extremely competitive person, do you feel like he could be in a situation where all of a sudden he walks away and, a year or two passes and he wants to get back in the mix? Because I personally, just to preview this for you, I don't feel that. I feel like DC has enough going on outside of the octagon that he could be very content and busy if he ultimately decided to walk away. It almost seems now like fighting is something that comes second to him with everything else that he has going on in terms of how he represents our sport, which is in a fantastic way, for that matter.
He's got a lot going on outside of the octagon. He is a family man, which keeps him very, very busy. And he's a product of AKA. And that means probably the gears are grinding off. He's been through some brutal camps with some brutal fighters who take sparring very, very seriously. And I think maybe he's just starting to feel the effects too much. And as a realistic guy who knows what he can and can't do, I don't think once we see him step away, we'll ever see him fight again. I think he knows that I'm just too old. I've been through too many gym wars. Coming back isn't good for me, and I have kids to raise. I don't think he's going to do that. He's not one of those guys that we're going to see come back over and over and over again. I don't see that at all.
The other side of this is Stipe has went through an eye injury. He's been medically cleared, but he really hasn't opened up that time frame yet for this fight. Do you feel like this is something where, and DC has talked about in the past, he set dates. And it's interesting because kind of another stance that we've both taken is once somebody uses the word retirement, once they've thought about it, once they've approached other people, once they've said it, then in many ways mentally they're done and they're ready to move on. Do you think this is going to be a situation where maybe the ball ultimately lands in Stipe's court to a degree, whether he's prepared and wants to fight DC next? And then obviously if it's not going to get done this year, we're just going to see DC walk away. Is it also a little strange that maybe DC retires without as much fanfare in ring as one would expect if he were to get a fight where we knew definitively, hey, this is most likely going to be it?
Yes. You always want to lay down your gloves in the ring if you can, or the octagon or wherever you happen to fight last. You always want to do that rather than, let's say he walks away next week. There's definitely more fanfare if everybody knows this is his last fight. The problem is when you look at Stipe, assuming everything's all right medically, and I don't know, it's hard to find another fight in the top 10 that's a huge seller that the fans can really get behind. All right? Ngannou's fighting Rosenstruck. They're unavailable. Junior Dos Santos just lost. Curtis Blades is an excellent fighter, but stylistically not as appealing as a DC trilogy. Also, the crossover appeal of Curtis Blades, great fighter, deserves a title shot, you could say. The pay-per-view numbers aren't going to be as good as a rubber match with DC. Derek Lewis, nope. Volkov, nope. Overeem's already beaten. I just don't see another really viable option when it comes to big fights and big names for Stipe. I don't see that. There may be some gamesmanship right now where he's trying to kind of, just drive home hammer home the point of I'm the champ and you're not. And you're going to fight when I say we're going to fight. There might be a little of that, but I don't see any other option for him right now at heavyweight. If he wants big money, he wants a fight that's going to really sell pay-per-views, DC's his best option. Period. End of sentence.
No, I mean, I agree with you on all fronts. It's just so weird that we're in this kind of tumultuous place, with both of these guys. We're essentially, playing a waiting game, but the waiting game is ultimately as both of these fighters age. And, as fans, it's almost like we're missing these opportunities to see them fight, or either of them fight outside of each other for that matter. I know you said, as far as what's viable or what makes sense or what would probably be marketable, these two really have the strongest connection. I think the connection they have is a lot less than what DC and John Jones had, but it's certainly the best perspective fight that either of them have that we would want to see that has meaning beyond just a fight. I mean, like you said, to a degree, there is some legacy still left for both of these guys when they choose to walk away. And it's interesting, DC, for better or worse, I know there's people that are far against him, and I know there's plenty more that are far for him. It would almost feel like a disservice to see him not retire in the actual ring after a competition.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see that. Considering everything he's done in his career, I'd like it to be a big deal. I'd like it to be after a fight, win or lose. I think that's the best send-off for him. And one of the tragedies would be if he, decided to just step away from the sport because he didn't get the fight he wanted. It would be just such a bummer of a send-off. And I would like more for him with all he's done for the sport.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but we're in a sport where people will argue no one deserves anything. But I think if you look at his contributions to the entirety of MMA, not just UFC, majority of people probably just know him as, UFC fighter Daniel Cormier. But this is a guy that's done it, was the face of Strikeforce, in my opinion, for a very long time and really helped ingrain MMA onto different platforms. I mean, when you talk about needing to go to Fox, when you need to talk about selling pay-per-views, for a long time, DC was one of the guys that did it. And to me, walking off on a loss is tough, but walking out on a loss not knowing it was his last fight, to me, is even tougher. Do you think this would also be, we've talked about it in the past, the UFC has kind of had an issue putting together championship fights to lead pay-per-views. Do you feel like this is also kind of a product that here's two guys for a long time were pretty much king on cards, where you see two stars kind of just happen to lead the sport at the same time? And as you said, we really haven't had kind of that next person step up in dominance. I mean, yeah, Ngannou's done great, but we've also seen, through Stipe, that he's not that invincible fighter we once thought.
The problem with the heavyweight division right now, and there's some new names coming in, Rosenstruck, of course, Curtis Blades, a lot of veteran names that we've seen for a long time. A lot of guys have hung on in that division. Of course, Junior Dos Santos just losing, but that have hung around in the top 10 for years and years. A lot of former champions like Overeem. It needs some new blood, and it's slowly trickling in. But this generation, Stipe, DC, Overeem, JDS, they're just getting long in the tooth. And what you and I want to see is a proper send out for the elites in the heavyweight division. That's Stipe, DC having that rubber match, and win or lose, that will define their legacies. And I'd like to see that as a capper to this era of heavyweights where Stipe, DC, I want to see who's number one. That'll tell us a lot about the division.
To kind of put a cap on this, we've went through the past couple weeks and talked about other series, whether it's, PFL, whether it's Bellator, kind of having the tendency to pillage some fighters. Do you think in these situations, whether it's Stipe or whether it's DC, you could have anyone lured to another division? Because here's the thing, they are huge names. Money can change a lot of people's opinions and ideas, but I feel like DC would never do it based on his position with the UFC. It probably would put a tremendous strain on what he does for the brand. But Stipe, as you mentioned, there's a lot of things that don't exactly line up for him in this either, in terms of where he is in the division. Do you think this could be a scenario where, hey, if we don't see this fight come through, maybe we have a scenario where Stipe tries to get out of a contract, renegotiate, and then now all of a sudden lands somewhere else where maybe the landscape isn't as unforgiving in terms of who he would be fighting.
I don't see it. I think he stays where he is and finishes out his career. I really believe that. Free agency is always a possibility, but I don't see how that works there. I think these are two UFC names. I think they're going to retire in the UFC.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I was going to be interested to see the context you took that, but it is strange that we've seen names leave that we never thought would leave, but for some reason with these guys, I just get the impression they are ultimate UFC to the core and are proud. I think this, what we look at right now with some of the fighters that currently, like you said, are starting to age, are the ones that saw the UFC through kind of the tough time and then up into the pinnacle and probably the highest level where it is right now in the sport. And I think when you have people that kind of ride that wave that have seen everything change, the whole landscape, I mean, not just from distribution, but to uniforms, to everyone that's become involved in this, it's become such a larger market. I feel like there are people that won't be willing to walk away from that for anything. And I feel like these two, and John Jones, since we mentioned him as well, it put in that conversation, that just would not be ready to leave.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, the competitive drive, DC, Stipe, John Jones, and the names you just talked about, is kind of off the chart. And it would just mean a lot to the sport, I think, if these guys got their rubber match and were able to settle it, because I just hate the unanswered questions. You talked about a little bit with John Jones and DC before. They've had 2 fights. John Jones was the better fighter in both of them, but, pissed hot in the second one. What could, you kind of want an ending to the story. And with DC and Stipe, where the first 2 fights had clean endings, clean, both of them finishes, no dispute. You want to see that third one, man. You don't want you don't want to trail off to the credits without a great ending. And this would be a great ending.
Just one final point, since you mentioned, this kind of would be a great conclusion. What type of lead up do you need for this, Jimmy? Is this going to be something where we're going to talk about maybe a whole spring, early summer tour of press conferences? Or is this going to be something where you're content with just, give me one press conference, give me 3 months, let them fight and I'll be happy? Or do you want to see kind of that send off kind of build and the anticipation kind of grow, and maybe we don't see this fight until August, September, October, and we get a couple different press conferences, maybe one, big group conference, but then also have this shown in terms of just the 2 of them showcased as well?
It depends on who else is on the card. I think it should be a big card. They're not the kind of trash talkers where I want to see more than one press conference, but I do like the retirement end of the road buildup. I want some little sentimentality in the packages and retrospectives and stuff like that to let us know that this is the end of the road. They're not great talkers, so I wouldn't necessarily give them multiple press conferences. I don't think we're going to get a lot of heat, but I would like to see the end of an era vibe in everything to do with this fight.
Yeah, there's definitely, with these two, an endless supply of highlight packages you could put together for the ESPN and UFC alum, and I think it would really be something that needs to be done properly and can be done properly to send these 2 off the way they both deserve, if this truly is going to be the end of the road for one or each of them, if this fight comes to fruition. So with that said, we appreciate you guys listening to this, and we will be back very shortly with more commentary.